The Parkinson's podcast is brought to you by the Davis Phinney Foundation and brings you the stories, wisdom, and expertise of people living with Parkinson's, care partners, and Parkinson's professionals. Welcome to a special edition of the Parkinson's podcast, presented by the No Barriers podcast. In this episode, join us for a candid conversation with Davis Phinney, co-founder of the Davis Phinney Foundation, and Kevin Kwok, a board member of the foundation, as they share their compelling journeys with Parkinson's.
Hey everyone, welcome to the No Barriers podcast. This is Eric Weinmeier, and psyched to have you guys on, Davis and Kevin. How are you guys doing today?
Pleasure to be here. Yeah, thank you. We're doing great.
And Kevin brought Davis, you guys both by my house. You guys were skiing one day, and you stopped by the house, and that was really fun to hang out with you guys. And then the other connection point is that Kevin and I grew up together. We both lived in Hong Kong, and I knew your family and your brothers. And this is a side note, but Jim Kwok, who passed away, was just a hero of mine, and I interviewed him on the No Barriers podcast. What, Kevin, probably 3 months before he passed away?
It's about 6 weeks, actually.
Oh, 6 weeks, yeah. Yeah, good. You had a good brother, not to depress you, but man, he was a good man.
I have to thank you, Eric. I don't know if I ever did this personally, but after you interviewed him, you so inspired him to make one more trip to see the family that he drove out here, and that's when we all got together in the mountains. And
that's right. That's the third connection point. I came up to Vail to see you guys and your family.
That's right. And because of your interview, we got to see him one more time.
That's awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah. We don't get enough time on Earth, but man, he made the most of it. So you got a No Barriers family, that's for sure.
We're all living and breathing it, right?
Yeah. So I'll just start, with the most obvious questions. I've been obviously researching you guys and watching all the podcasts and reading all the articles and everything. And Davis, I'll start with you. So, obviously after this amazingly successful career, most successful cyclist in history, it's just amazing. After your career, you're on TV and your life's thriving. And then you said you had these symptoms where you just didn't quite feel right. You know what I mean? So what was it that didn't feel right? What were you noticing, the changes? Because I'm 55, right? And I sometimes will do a workout and I'm like gasping. And I'm like, maybe is that age, or is it something I need to go to a doctor and figure out? You know what I mean? It's such a blurry line.
Yeah. Well, in my case, it was not feeling right. What I meant by that was that I was inordinately tired all the time, and my gait was messed up. My walking, I was stumbling along, and those two things specifically are indications of some Parkinson's involvement. But also, then I subsequently started tremoring a little bit, and it was actually in Australia where I was doing a broadcast, and I was interviewing this cyclist, and my hand just wouldn't stop shaking, and the camera person was like, "Hey Davis, what's going on, mate? It's 40 degrees centigrade out. You shouldn't be chilly." And I go, "I have no idea." But that then led me on a long journey of discovery of finally getting the diagnosis for Parkinson's at age 40.
Yeah. And that was young onset Parkinson's disease. And how do they establish that you're young enough to be diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease? Just anyone under 40 or?
How does
that?
I think it's 50.
Most people get it when they're older, I guess.
Yes. In their 60s.
Yeah. Well, you and I are in the same boat. We both lost the lottery because my disease, juvenile schisis, was juvenile, And so that means, I went blind at a really young age. Most people don't go blind unless they have this kind of acute form of it. So we're in the same club, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's not a club that you just assume to be a member of, but we both have made the most of it.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was going blind, I know that I went into massive denial. I was just like, oh, the sun's in my eyes. I didn't eat my Cheerios this morning. I think it's like the brain's defense mechanism. Did that happen to you guys? Kevin, did you go into denial for a little while? Like, just it's so overwhelming, you don't even know what to think about it, so you just make up excuses?
Yeah, I think it's very typical to go through that early denial to our own detriment, because I think we waste a lot of time, but we have to go through it in our journey. That personal journey to go from denial to acceptance to almost embracing it is where we've come now. But for sure, I denied it for at least 3 or 4 years. Didn't tell my employers, but tried to just fight it off as though it was something that we could overcome, which I think is something that comes back to haunt you when you do that.
Do you think that a lot of people with Parkinson's try to keep it a secret and just don't open up and share with people? That must be a miserable burden to carry.
Well, yeah, I mean, in our community, there's a fairly high percentage of people who just want to be seen as normal, so-called. And so they do whatever they can to project wellness and not. But what is interesting, in my case, I had to come out, so to speak, with my disease fairly quickly because I was a public person and I was on television. I was slurring my words and my hand was shaking a lot, and so I just basically had to bite the bullet and be public about it. It's very from almost within, I would say, 2 or 3 months of diagnosis.
And I imagine you're like, oh gosh, there goes my TV career, there goes like everything that I was moving towards, and there must have been a massive mourning period, right?
Yes. In my case, I just tend to be a positive person.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to go down into a morass of depression.
Right.
If I could help it. And so that one thing that I've preached from day one is being moment to moment is not such a bad thing when you've got a degenerative, disabling disease like Parkinson. Because thinking long term, when I used to go into the doctor's office and there would be older folks who had Parkinson's that was well advanced from anything I've faced, but I would just look at them and I'd be like, I can't be like that guy, which is not really a kind thing to say, but
it's human.
But it is human. And so I'd walk out of there and think, what can I do to not end up in such a bad place? And that was a lot of what we started our foundation with, was because of that ethos of wanting to help people, give them some more control and choice in their life and the course of their disease.
Yeah, it's a beautiful legacy that you've created there. Kevin, when you were diagnosed, what was your reaction? Like, of course, I'll tell you how I felt when I got diagnosed with going blind. It was like sad, but it was also a bitter relief because now I knew it was something that I could hang on to and say, okay, it just cuts down the uncertainty just a little bit or something. How did it feel for you?
For me, it was one of those things where it was like, hey, this is a disease of older individuals, and I'm still young, and I'm going to beat this thing. And there was almost this false pretense that I could overcome it, unlike the others out there. There's a saying that many of us have in the earlier stages of Parkinson's. It's, you don't fake your illness, you fake your wellness. People would say, how are you doing? And you'd always feign that everything's great. There's this, I can do this, I can keep working, I keep doing all the things that I'm accustomed to doing. But it has a way of catching up to you. So that was the way I approached it.
That's fascinating. And so for you, Davis, I see a lot of people in my No Barriers community. We talk about adaptability, right? And like in the movies, you come to terms with things, you climb a mountain and you just have this moment and then suddenly you've accepted everything and your life's great. But it doesn't really work like that. Adaptability is like you have to go through this process, and it's probably something that never ends, right? And especially for someone like you who is this world-class athlete, it's easy to get stuck, I would imagine, and start comparing your past life to your new life. How do you manage to be adaptable and move forward in your life?
Great question. Eric, I feel like that adaptation, as you say, is always ongoing. And there's no aha moment where you suddenly going, aha, I feel like I can understand this and I'm going to be able to manage my life well and stay positive and whatnot. But I don't know, to answer your question, I guess I would say that help me out, Kim. I'm having a part.
Yeah, Kevin, how about you in terms of adaptability?
I think the adaptability is something that's always going to be a challenge for those of us with Parkinson's, because just when you thinking you figured it out, a new symptom layers on.
Yeah.
For your listeners, I think it's important to understand the body has numerous neurotransmitters. You have serotonin, you have norepinephrine, and you have dopamine. Parkinson's is a disease of dopamine deficiency predominantly. And what dopamine plays a role in is every system in your body. What starts off maybe as a tremor can lead into things like GI effects. It can affect hearing, it can affect sight, smell, mental acuity, it hits just about everything. And the problem is it doesn't hit all of those symptoms in any sequence or order. So
everyone's different too, right? Everyone's and their progression is different, right? So it's maybe even hard to compare notes with each other.
That's right.
Yeah, it is. Although there's enough commonality that Parkinson's people can talk on a certain level to each other and we understand each other and what we're going through. And so that's really helpful. But one aspect of Parkinson's that's been difficult for Kevin and I both is the effect on our voice, which you can hear now. And when you lose your voice, you lose so much of your confidence and your ability to face your fears of going out and speaking in public. And so then you start to isolate yourself. And that's a very bad rabbit hole to go down.
The issue of communication that Dave is talking about is very real. It's not just the words, the physical act of speaking, the mental acuity of remembering what you're going to talk about, or the fluency of just being able to sort of give and take, that skill set that you used to have of that, what's the right word? The interchange of conversation. So what happens is oftentimes when you see a Parkinson's person is we withdraw and we just sit there. So,
yeah, because another aspect of the disease is that we slow down. our thinking slows down and our ability to react slows down. So being at a crowded dinner table is very hard because the conversation's flying back and forth and you want to throw your hand out and say something, but by the time you do, it's already moved on. And as Kevin said, you just feel like, well, I'll just sit back and observe.
Right.
And
it's easy to live in the shadows, but that's why the work you guys do is so important. Do you have a pet peeve of like, do people, because you speak slower, do people try to like finish your sentences? That must be irritating as hell.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you a funny anecdote about that, which is that I often get asked for my opinion on something, and that I'll just dwell in the Parkinson moment and be quiet for like 30 seconds, and then by that point, the person will say, yeah, thanks. I think we're
Don't
right.
even wait for the answer.
No, I think you're right. And they credited me with being some slaves there. Well,
That's a brilliant commentary you just had. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's funny in a,
it's funny.
In an anecdote. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I like that somehow I get this reputation as a sage because we haven't said anything. But I just
that guy is a genius. He's so wise.
Well, Kevin and I are master listeners for sure. Oh, you do get that. You learn to listen and be more of a background person than up in front, which we're used to being so much in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I got to give Kevin a ton of credit because even for me being nervous about doing this interview because of my voice and my cognition being slowed, and he was just like, come on, Davis, let's just do it. Don't worry about it.
Glad you took that chance. Yeah.
Well, and so as I said, I mean, facing our fears is not so much about doing radical physical activity in general. It's more about just the small thing, about
oh my gosh,
being in a conversation or whatnot. Yeah, you brought up earlier, Eric, that you met us first after the ski trip back down through Golden, when we do our weekly trek up to the mountains and ski a day and come back down. But that doesn't come easy. That comes with a lot of preparation and work beforehand. The months of training, the balance drills. As Davis and I get in the gym, we really focus on train your weaknesses, not necessarily just your strengths. So
right.
things like balance and gait. We're excited to see when we are hiking out to the chairlift, barely able to get our boots on, but you put us on the mountain and then all of a sudden we're free. There's something amazing that happens for us with skiing, that gravity works very well for going with it. Yeah. And if you can keep yourself relaxed and just flow down the hillside, then we have a series of Parkinson's-free moments where we're not thinking about our disease and we're just unaffected, and physically we're capable of skiing quite well. And it's just such a beautiful thing. Yeah. It's almost like the way I describe it is when you have a disease that robs speed from you, the ability to have that moment where you just hear the wind in your helmet screaming down the hill, using balance and control, but having that speed back, the grins on our face are like you've never seen before.
That's awesome. And I heard some people that maybe feel self-conscious, like working out in a gym or skiing. There are groups for folks with Parkinson's where you can go dance and stuff like that. So that might fit a certain type of person too, right? Where if they want to get out there, but they just feel too self-conscious, there's a kind of a community out there, right?
Yes. I mean, here in Boulder, for example, there's a very good community that has a selection of group endeavors, whether it's dance or boxing or spinning or singing, and all of those things you can do with other folks who are like-minded and like-afflicted.
I want to take a second to brag about Davis on here.
Brag away.
Davis has always professed that exercise is good for you. But the foundation actually, early on in its inception, funded some research looking at biking, and actually showed that seminal research showed that actual biking can actually slow the progression of the disease. And back then, 20 years ago, there was no evidence that really worked. And today, now you're seeing this plethora of programs around the world on exercise that really came from Davis's early insights.
Wow. Thanks, Kevin.
That's rad. Do you guys find that there's a balancing act between living fully, like you guys are out skiing, and just living life as best you can, and those people who like just maybe sit there waiting for a cure, just putting all the weight on just like, please have a cure in the foreseeable future, right? If you do that, I imagine it could cut down on the living side.
Yeah, that has long been my mantra, is that waiting for a cure is too passive a response.
Yeah.
And then you have to be more proactive on your own behalf. And I get it, it's not easy for everyone on the planet to get out and be active. And there are many people in our community who would never consider themselves athletic at all. But that said, you still need to try. And even like Dr. Bas Bloom, who's from Holland and world famous for his endorsement of our programs and whatnot, he'll say, take exercise snacks of just a minute, 15 or 20 times a day. And if you start there, then that's better than not doing anything at all. And so I always say something is better than nothing. And you can surprise yourself by building up. And that's where these groups also help, because if you have a scheduled meetup where you're going to be doing a certain amount of exercise with some friends, then that helps a lot.
And sometimes I heard you say, I think on one interview, just even if you could just walk, just get out and start walking around the neighborhood, right?
Yes, exactly. Get outside if you can and do whatever you have to do to be active. And the thing is, like, I get a lot of credit for the fact that I've had Parkinson's for 23 years or something, and I still ride my bike every day. And
that's awesome.
He rides his bike to spin class.
That's rad. And then you guys box and do yoga.
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff, right?
Cross-train.
Yeah.
Find the things that you like to do and do them regularly is really the key.
And I liked how you said train for your weaknesses too, not just the things you like to do, because sometimes that hard stuff of balance, and to some degree we all lose our balance as we get older, but I imagine especially in Parkinson's, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what does as many of us said is the falls that come about because we're not training balance.
I took a digger this past summer where I was half jogging across the street and I didn't lift my foot up high enough to get over the curb, and I caught my foot and went straight face plant in a tree. And I was like, well, that was stupid. Because I'm always one who's professing that you've got to stay present, you've got to stay focused on what you're doing. And so even I get caught out with that one.
I've run into a few trees myself. So tell me about the Davis Phinney Foundation. So you guys do online resources and you do some stuff around research, and you also do some events and community engagement. So yeah, tell me the gamut here.
Well, I mean, that was a good summary of what we do. We were most well known for our summits, which we held around the country. We had like 50 of them in total, where before COVID, we would gather the tribe in a room, and there was usually 500 to 1,000 people who were listening to our words and words from other noted neurologists and people who had expertise in Parkinson's. But those we've put aside for the last few years. Because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at getting back into those. But also, what I'm most excited about right now is our ambassador program. And so with people like Kevin and others who have Parkinson's, or a care partner with someone who has Parkinson, and those, we have about 100 some ambassadors around the country. And so if you have been recently diagnosed or have a question about Parkinson, you can look up an ambassador, either local to you or national, and ask them the question that you're maybe not getting answers from your healthcare provider. And so that one-on-one sort of service, or even if you have a question of the foundation, you can call us, and you'll likely get a good, helpful answer to your question. And so that's some of what we do.
That's amazing. Yeah, good resources, good connection with other human beings. It reminds me, I forgot to ask, how'd you guys actually meet? You guys seem so tight and get a lot of strength. I have really good friends. I'm so lucky in my life, and you guys seem to really be good friends.
We met when I was living in the Bay Area. I went to my neurologist at Stanford, who also happened to be Davis's neurologist, and said, you guys really need to connect.
Yeah.
And so that's how we initially met. I think, Davis, you were invited to do a speaking program in the Bay Area that you couldn't make.
Oh, yeah.
And then you asked me
to do it. Yeah, and I used to talk to Kevin for hours on the phone, like when you were commuting.
Yeah, you were my commute buddy instead of watching or listening to NPR.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
So we've just been really tight ever since.
Well, it shows, man. You guys, it's fun hanging with you guys. So what about like Parkinson's? Are they any closer to understanding like why people get it? Is it environmental? Is it genetic? Or is it just a total mystery still?
You want to start now? I mean,
that's a big question.
I'll let you roll with that one.
There's an element of both genetics and environmental that both have to collide. You need a certain genetic makeup that predisposes you to the risk of developing Parkinson's, but then you need a triggering event. And that triggering event could be exposure to an environmental toxin, it could be a blow to the head with inflammation, it could be numerous things. And so that complexity of linking the two have to happen in order to develop Parkinson's. We are getting closer to understanding the mechanism, And I think that part has been very exciting for me. I was working in the same industry as your father, Eric. You did
pharmaceuticals.
And I've worked all my life in the pharmaceutical industry. And so for me to see this coming together of an inflection, we were hitting an inflection point where I think there's not been a lot of advances in the last 30, 40 years. But I hope that we'll start seeing some of the commitments to research paying off. The conversation that you guys were having earlier about doing something for now is so important as we wait. You can't just idly wait for the miracle cure to happen. And so the balance between research and living well today both have to be high priorities.
I keep hearing about these deep brain stimulators, and it sounds like just like a silver bullet, but I imagine it's not quite a silver bullet, but it is a game changer, right? Do you guys both have those? Or one of you I saw, maybe it was you, Davis. It was an interview I saw with you, Kevin, that you got that procedure.
Well, we both had the same surgeon at Stanford who did ours.
Okay, got it.
And in our case, both were, I would say, spectacular successes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the thing with DBS, as it's called, for deep brain stimulation, is that it's unfortunately not necessarily the right thing for everyone. And so Kevin and I both went through this phase where we were real cheerleaders for DBS. But then some of the people that you promote to get the surgery have more complications or just don't have as good a result as you've had. And so now we're a little more circumspect. But in our case, it was really a home run.
Yeah, I tell everyone it was life-changing. I went from taking medications 8 or 9 times a day, every 2 or 3 hours. If I wasn't on it, my symptoms would come back. And then when I had DDS, I was able to go medication-free for 4 years, which to me was, it was like daylight savings time on steroids, right? The ability to go back to a stage where you could function fairly well again was wonderful. But it's not a cure. That's the thing to remember. It just provides really good quality time for those of us where it works.
Yeah, that's great. Davis, you alluded to this already, but Parkinson's sort of forces you to slow down. And you're not getting the highs of crushing up a hill in the Alps in first place. Is there kind of an irony there that forcing you to slow down? I've noticed at 55, just in my life, slowing down, I'm starting to be able to appreciate things like you mentioned, like good meals and just hanging with your kids, just all those little moments that maybe you would have taken for granted years ago when you're on top of the world, right?
Yeah, no, you said that very well, Eric. I think one of the lessons that I've learned from slowing down is that I'm much more observant of the people and the world. And I really appreciate the simple things of life, whether it's a sunrise or sunset. And I know that sounds trite, but it's very much true. And so I've become a kind of an aesthetic where I just appreciate beauty wherever it finds me. And slowing down has allowed me to take the foot off the gas in most respects. And so I do spend good time with my family and my wife. And that's proven really helpful in the form of medicine in its own right.
That's awesome. And then, Kevin, despite slowing down, you also have to be proactive, right? You have to walk this fine line, right? Because you got to be on top of the research and be on top of your exercise, your therapies, your medicine, all, right? Even though you're slowing down, you still got to be, you can't be passive.
That's exactly right. You know, with Parkinson's, one of the big issues comes apathy. You have to fight that so much because it's easy just to say, I don't want to exercise today, or I don't want to do this, and find excuses. I think that part of the thing about the friendships that we talk about are you surround yourself with people who pull you up. That's so important for my life.
And also, Kevin, you said it very well, is that there are still things where we can go fast and we can do quickly, like skiing or like cycling downhill. I still will rip a descent on my road bike or on the trail. Yeah. And so my wife did this the other day when we'd been in Spain for the past 2 months. And the trail system there is unrivaled. And we're just letting go of the brakes and going down this double track road. And I just dropped her straight away. And she's an Olympic gold medalist. She knows how to run. And then she catches up to me finally when I slowed down towards the bottom. And she was like, damn, that was really nice to watch. Yeah, I can echo that riding in your dust, Davis. Watching you cut the line is a thing of beauty to watch, and you do that on skis and you do that on your bike. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and so I don't say that as trying to brag or necessarily encourage people to do risky things. But for me, that little bit of risk is like a day's worth to fill my bucket.
It's joy and it's magic. Yeah, you got to have that still.
You must get that. You must understand that really well.
Well, blind people aren't fast either. So a similar thing. Like when I'm skiing, I'm free to move, just to be flowing in this fluid way. As a blind person, you don't always get a chance to do that. So I get that totally. And you guys also talk a lot about kind of this pursuit to live well. And I'm going to end with that question because everyone has a different definition of living well. Eventually we're all going to get frail and die, right? So it's not living forever, living well. What is it? What does it mean for both of you?
Wow, that's a really loaded question, Eric. Wow.
Sorry.
It's sort of like the quest for life, right? It's that ability to bring joy and pleasure in what you do. I think it's Davis and I talk about this quest for, it's almost like a Zen-like life where you get appreciation not of what you could do in the past, but what you can do now. To me, the mindfulness part of this is so essential to do well. What about you, David?
That was very well put.
That was well said.
Yeah, and so along those lines, living well to me means being able to allow myself to enjoy the simple aspects of life that still come to me. And that can be anything, even a chore. Because one thing I talk about is like the Zen of vacuuming, which, because vacuuming is kind of hard for someone who has Parkinson's to navigate with that thing and not trip over it and not crash. If you just get into the aspect of vacuuming and don't worry about having to be done or wanting to be done and do something else, then it can become a real pleasure. And that's what I try to apply to much of my life, is being in a state of enjoyment of simple things and sharing that with other people and surrounding myself with good friends in my family. And that's like the key to living well for me.
I'll be thinking about that because I have a sink full of dishes and a dishwasher I need to unload in a few minutes.
Is that
Man, I love talking to you guys. I could talk to you all day, and I appreciate this time together so much. And I love it. Maybe we could all go skiing together sometime this winter and spend more time together. And Kevin, you've been out to some No Barriers events, so man, I just love getting to know you. And maybe months ago I'd say you were an acquaintance, but I'm going to call you a friend now, so thank you.
Well, we have a lot more time to do more things.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm surrounded by two titans here. Eric, what you've done for 20 years, and Davis is also celebrating 20 years of helping other people lift up. I'm really blessed to be on this call with both of you. You guys keep doing what you do to help us all.
That's a mic drop moment.
No barriers to everyone. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Parkinson's Podcast. For more information about the Davis Phinney Foundation and to learn about educational offerings and community events for people affected by Parkinson's, please visit davisphinneyfoundation.org or dpf.org. This podcast includes information about Parkinson's and insights from our Parkinson's community. It is not intended as a substitute for treatment advice from your own medical providers.